he was an interesting man. Now, I don't know how they calculated this. I forget how many thousands of sermons he preached in his lifetime. But if you're not aware of what he did in the Americas, in North America, John Wesley was a circuit riding preacher. He rode horseback from town to town to town. And I remember part of this was usually he preached about 7 sermons a day, 7 days a week. And I did see a picture of his saddle as he rode on horseback. He had this desk, a little bigger than this lectern here, built into the what's it called there? I want to say shoehorn, but that's not it. It's not a horn, just the horn of the saddle. Isn't there another name for it? Well, saddle horn. There we go. On the saddle horn. And he had this desk built in, and that's as the horse moved. That's where, and I keep thinking, man, I've sat on a lot of horses. I don't know how in the world he could ride on that thing. But thousands upon thousands of messages he preached during his lifetime, and someone has estimated he rode over 1 million miles on horseback, and I don't know exactly how they did that unless they, knew his routes and where he went all through the colonies preaching. But one of the biographers called him at 85. He wasn't a very big man. Here's another story in his life. Every time he came home from preaching, his wife got pregnant. And the neighbors wrote about the fights he and his wife had, the disagreements. And since he was a little man, at least there's one account where she knocked him down and she was dragging him around the house by the hair of his head. So, God is the one you'll sort all that stuff out in eternity. But at 85, one biographer called him that tireless little man. That tireless little man that was still riding horses and still preaching 7 times a day. And so, there's hope out there for you and I, John. Okay, so that's Solomon's conclusion. It's the end of the story. It's the poem of old age and how we're to make our way through everything else in Solomon and come to this conclusion. Now, it's still fun sorting through everything. So with that in mind, well, this is like an add-on to the poem of old age. This is the poem of time, which we get in chapter 3. We want to go back there. And I want to walk through a couple of things in it from the text before we actually look at the poem of time. Is in your syllabus too. It's back there in the back, but we're going to read it here. And it's familiar. I find that people use this at weddings sometimes. I've hardly ever seen it taken in its real light as it's given in Scripture. People just tend to think it's, interesting, whatever. So, chapter 3, time. It ties in with what we just looked at, the poem of old age, because inevitably time is going to take us there.
This is on page 16.
Okay, page 16 in your syllabus. We'll go there in a minute after we hit a couple things in the text here in chapter 3. There is an appointed time for everything, and there's a time for every event under heaven. A time to give birth and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to throw stones and a time to gather stones. A time to embrace and a time to shun embracing. A time to search and a time to give up as lost. A time to keep and a time to throw away. A time to tear apart and a time to sew together. A time to be silent and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time for peace. What profit is there to the worker in which he toils? I have seen the task which God has given the sons of men in which to occupy themselves. Now here's where we want to deal with the text in a couple of ways to help us. He has made everything appropriate in its time. He has also set eternity in their hearts. Now, I talked about that. That's back with our principle 1, that God is, nothing in this life is going to bring meaning to our life. Yet, so that man will not find out the work which God has done from the beginning, even the end. Let's take 1 second right there. This is a repetitive little statement that he makes more than once in this book, which means that you and I are engaged in a futile exercise trying to understand what God does. Remember I said, at least first week or last week, we can know God very personally, very intimately, but we cannot understand God. He has not given us the ability to totally understand Him. Now, we can understand partially if we work real hard at it. But I find a lot of people frustrated with what God hasn't told them. Eileen and I have this discussion all the time. I tell her, okay, listen, honey. God has told us all He thinks that we need to know. You know, on a need-to-know basis, we don't need to know the stuff that you think we ought to know, that God hasn't told us about, and what He's doing. So what he says here, that you and I will never find out the work, all the things God has done from the beginning even to the end. So that takes us someplace else. I was thinking as Ray was talking about all the martyrs and potential martyrs in the world right now, and real ones, and martyrs from the first day of the birth of the church until now, people always ask the question, what will we do in heaven? I know two things for sure that we're going to be doing. One is we're going to be taught by the master teacher himself, Jesus, all the stuff we didn't learn here on the planet, which is tons, about Him in the Bible. We're going to have teaching. We're also going to get to know everybody else's story. Everybody has a story, for heaven's sakes. Every one of us in this room has a story about how we came to know Christ and what we did, and on and on. As I was sitting there listening to Ray, I thought, and I call our lives the American bubble. We're in the American bubble. It's different than any other place on the planet. It's different than any other time in history. We've been living in the American bubble. It's a soft, easy life. The biggest thing we have to contend with is all the stuff the world entices us with to take us away from God, which is a lot in America. So we'll get to know everybody else's story. Now, I was reading a Christian magazine the other day, and it shows this group of millennials. Somebody hand me their phone. Who's got a phone handy? You got to be watching the time for me anyway, honey, so I don't go over. Where are we? How much time we have left?
We got all day.
We got all day.
Your days are getting shorter.
Okay.
It's 11:42.
Okay. So how much time do I have left? Oh my gosh!
Is that right?
Yeah, quarter after.
How much time do we have in this thing? I mean,
Laura Wonderly wants us to move in the gym, Pastor. So
she wants what?
in the gym, we have to pack OCC boxes in the gym.
I-
We moved to two, so you know.
Okay. So what time are we supposed to end the second service? I just work here. That's
11:45.
11:45. Okay.
Half an hour.
Okay, I got a half an hour. Okay. All right. So, I'm reading this Christian magazine, and they have a cartoon with millennials, and it has this group of millennials standing around with their phone. And the caption is, how this group will be recognized in heaven. With their phone in their hand. And texting. Yeah, no texting. Okay, so...
Probably not talking.
So, we'll get to know everyone else's story. And as I was listening to Ray, I thought, oh, we're going to look bad. All those martyrs and all those people who lived in other parts of the world, and when they tell their stories, it's a good thing we're redeemed and we don't have sinful minds up there, because we'll want to run and hide somewhere, because we all had it so easy. We all had it so easy. And that's not our fault. I mean, we didn't like petition to be born in America. It's just like Eccleslastes says here about the fate of men. Their biggest enemy is time and chance. And time and chance overtake them all. And I've thought a million times in my life how fortunate I was to be born in America. And it really comes home when you go other places, like India. And Ray mentioned India this morning. And I remember when I was over there on this teaching tour for 10 days, and we went with Dr. Sam, who's the head of India Gospel League. He taught in like 4 different places for like groups of 500 pastors, different guys. And we went up to this one place in the north, which is closer to India's neighbor up there, Pakistan, which they're always having trouble with. And so anyway, Sam left us there, myself and my teaching partner. He says, we're going to leave you for 2 days. We're going to head on up north to check on some missionaries up there, and we'll be back in 2 days, so you guys have the whole show. He teaches us.
There's a little bit of a static in this
So the other
recording.
guy-
Sorry.
the guys from India
He'll be
Gospel
back to
League.
normal soon.
And I said, sitting there eating dinner, and I said, so it sounded a little ominous, those guys going north. What's going on up there? He said, well, I don't know, but they were up there a couple weeks ago and the road got blown up in front of them. Somebody put off mines and blew the road up. And he said, it's pretty dangerous up there on the Pakistan border. But Sam's going to go anyway. He and the other guys are going anyhow because they have churches up there and they have people up there and they want to make sure they can help and stuff's going right. So I thought, man, this stuff is real. They got the road blown up in front of them 2 weeks ago when they went up there. So anyway, just an exhortation. We want to do our best for God. We haven't been exactly handed a good society to work in because it draws us away with all the pleasures it offers. And every once in a while, I'm getting off on a little tangent here for a second. Every pastor has their, everybody's got criticism. Every pastor in the world has been criticized, and stuff happens, you wish didn't happen. And I've thought, and I've talked to God about it several times, and I say to God, God, I've had it really easy. I haven't been thrown down in a well. I haven't been put in stocks and beaten. I haven't been put in a log and sawed in two. All in all, I've had it pretty easy. And but there have been other challenges. So anyway, we are where we are, America, in the American bubble, and we just want to do our best for God while we're here. So let's continue on here in the poem of time. I want us to look at a couple words. He has made everything appropriate in its time. He has all set a centered eternity in their hearts. Another translation is, he has made every event appropriate in its time. The real translation of that Hebrew word is every delight. And you get my little rant here on translators. Our translators, I think, don't always do the best they can. I mean, it's a lot of work, and they get the best scholars and all kinds of stuff. But I run across places all the time where I go, they should. One of the things they do is they water down really strong words because they want it to appeal to a broad mass of people. And if you use a really strong word, a really emphatic word, and you give it its full meaning, it sounds really harsh. I mean, there's some passages in the Bible, they are harsh, and they sound harsh when you get the real words in there. So he has made every delight appropriate in its time. And the word appropriate is the word beautiful. He has made every delight beautiful in its time. Now, isn't there a secular song somewhere that everything is beautiful in its time? Somebody tell me what that song is.
Everything is beautiful.
It's a Christian song?
Way.
No.
In its time. There's one somewhere, a secular song. Everything is beautiful in its time. It's an old song. So that had to come from Ecclesiastes. By the way, back here somewhere else, Ecclesiastes talks about what you've done in secret. You better be really careful because a bird will tell someone. I remember my grandma used to say, she'd tell me something I did, and I said, Grandma,